Call this meeting to order and ask that the roll be called.
Mike Kammer.
Present.
Joe Stacy.
Present.
Bruce Hendricks.
Present.
Dan Palmer. Here. John Getz. Present. We have a quorum.
All right. Thank you for that. All right. The first thing on our agenda today is the approval of the March 29th, 2018 meeting minutes. And do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
You know, actually, I don't know if it matters. I mean, it doesn't matter to me, but I don't know if it matters to John or to the village. But I think part of this was not correct. So in terms of, I think this was John's comments on page 5 of 6.
Okay.
Second paragraph, like halfway through where it says J. Stacy asked K-Stone, since the original bike paths plan, we're not on the road, blah, blah, blah. I think those were all John's comments to the, through that paragraph. And then the next paragraph where it says J. Stacy asked the North Central DuPage Regional Trail, those were all John's comments as well.
Okay, correct. So we will change that.
Prior to that, everything else was correct.
Any other comments on this?
No, other than that, motion
All right, a motion.
Second that motion.
Motion to approve the minutes by Joe Stacy and seconded by Bruce Hendricks. And can we have do we need to take a vote on that?
I'll take a vote. Joe Stacy.
yes.
Bruce Hendricks.
Yes.
Dan Palmer. Yes. John Getz.
Yes.
Mike Kammer.
Yes.
Good. Approved.
Okay, very good. Progressing on, our item number 3, old business, new business. First thing that we had here was Bike Month Proclamation, which was done for the month of, what was it, either March or May, I can't remember. It was May. May. And that was made a proclamation at the Village Hall. So that was a good thing. Bike path maintenance update. Unless anyone have any other comments on the Bike Month Proclamation. All right, bike path maintenance update. Jim, if you've got anything there that...
I thought that Tyler had done a handout, but I think we're in a situation where we have gotten the money allocated for public works, and then they're going to do some of the paths that we had indicated in terms of our chart. I don't know when they're going to start, but it's scheduled for doing something this summer. So I think they're going to take a few of them on. I know they've done some work right at Army Trail and Munger Road for clearing. They put the stop lights in there and they've cleared some of the trees away because that's where the county path's going to be, but that wasn't part of ours. But I know they want to do some of the key ones that we identified. So how far they'll get will depend on.
And the bike path was done. I haven't actually gone east on Stearns Road since they fixed that bridge, so I don't know, maybe some of you have ridden on that, but that bike path along with that bridge has been...
We did that. That was
right?
That was one of the things that we had. That was kind of the path was kind of secondary. The bridge was really the problem there, but we did finish that one, and that was outside. Contractor did that.
Have any of you guys been on that section? Have you ridden across it?
Where, which one?
On
By the school there by Prospect. East,
Terry's been on it.
west of Prospect.
Yeah, I have not since the
Yeah,
bridge.
in essence, it's reopened now.
Yeah.
It's very well done.
Yes, it was.
Moved the wooden bridge and made a bridge right along
Good.
the road.
Right.
Does it go all the way to Bartlett Road, Main Street, or is it just past the bridge in front of Jewel there? I haven't been on it yet.
Yeah, to the east.
To the east, how far does it go to the east? From the bridge on, is there a bike path there?
All the way to Stearns in that location.
All the way to County Farm.
County Farm.
I was gonna
Yeah,
say,
all the way along Stearns.
Then east, Main Street? East of Bartlett Road? What is that?
Yeah.
What is the
East,
road run to?
east it does, yeah,
South
South Bartlett, and then it
East,
goes all the way
goes
east.
all the way
Okay.
to the
Part of that, part of that path before they replaced it was along the road, right?
Right, it was
Now
close to the road.
Now they've changed that or kind of separated it somewhat?
They had to put in a whole new culvert,
Yeah.
move the path away from the road, build it up. There was some floodplain involved, so we had to make sure that the culvert accommodated the flood flows of the creek. So it was a bigger project, and it was done in, I think, 3 weeks less than the anticipated road closure, because we actually closed the road.
Yeah, it seemed like it went pretty fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
it
did it less than 8 weeks. I know that. We were
Right.
appreciative of Dan speeding that up.
So the path that I think you had said in the prior meeting was the one that goes like behind the funeral home?
Yeah, the
Actually,
diagonal one.
The diagonal one, not yet necessarily behind there, once it goes over like, once it gets through like Apple Orchard or where there's, I forget what road it crosses over, where the Frisbee golf
By
is.
Struckman, it goes over like
Goes over-
Struckman there and
Right.
goes all the way down to the, where the Frisbee area is at.
Yeah, right.
I honestly don't know if we've started that, but I don't think we have, so.
I ran it about 3 weeks ago, maybe 4 weeks ago, and they hadn't, but,
Yeah,
you know, but
and
I
it
did.
hasn't been done.
I hadn't been on there for quite a while, but it is pretty bad. I mean, it definitely needs, it's got a lot of those raises, and it needs it pretty bad.
Yeah, what they concentrated on was the road program, so you saw some of the pavement replaced in some of the areas, resurfacing, striping, that kind of stuff, so.
Yeah.
So they do want to get to that.
The other thing I'd like for you to kind of give me a little clearer idea of is the Invest in Cook grant updates, if you could. And that section is for the area in front of Village Church, isn't it? Is that what we're talking about here?
Yes, the Invest in Cook grant is that area by the church that goes all the, where the water ponds and it's kind of down and
Yeah.
swales, so that's the area from essentially going from, it's going from,
Devon,
it goes, Devon going eastward up through past the creek up to connect to where that new house was built.
Yeah.
That's the stretch that we're working on.
So the first grant was for basically the engineering, right?
This grant, the one that we're operating under now, is for this design, and the attached, this is the preliminary engineering design. We hired engineering resources. So this is going to be the path design that they're going to follow.
And if we get another grant, that would be for what? The
Constructing
development?
it.
Huh?
We'll construct this plan. That's
So that really isn't going to get done until when, like
next year.
next year, spring of?
Because I think he's got in here, the second grant was due March, and then the award to help the construction will be in August 2018. It'll probably be, and then he's got 2019. August is too late to start this.
All right.
And all that swales will be eliminated, and it'll be all piped and put in, and there'll be some bioswales that we'll create there too, so.
Well,
A nice design.
yeah, well, it brings up the question about, and something I've tried to emphasize that I hope the village is doing is working with the village church. And
Yes.
because on this plan, I see that we still have 2 entries, but I know that the church is talking about
They're eliminating one of those,
limiting the west entry.
right, and they're gonna put one on, Devon. This is preliminary, but they know that that will be out of there.
Which will actually be a great thing from the perspective of the bike path, because it'd be one less entry and exit.
Right.
When people are coming across it, because I saw it the other day, well, it was at Devon and West Bartlett Road. A woman had pulled into the white crossed-out areas, and a biker came through and tried to stop, and he had his feet clipped in, and he fell over on his bike and scraped up his knee, and talked to the lady in the car ahead of me and about why she was blocking the crossed-off area, and then went on his way and wasn't happy, obviously. But what I'm getting at is that the more cars you have coming in and out of areas that are adjacent to the bike path, the less safe it is. And so the church is trying to be proactive, I think, not necessarily only to take down the traffic. It's a better ingress and egress, or whatever
Right.
it's referred to. If they come in the east entryway and then exit out over on Devon behind the church, and that's kind of the intent. So I was just curious, when I saw this, whether that was being accounted for. And I know that the church is already going to start paving that property in the near future. And so I was always concerned that no sooner do they get that done than the village is going to come in and do their thing, and then right hand's not going to know what the left hand's doing, and then we're going to be tearing up what the church did and replacing something. So I just hope that we're on top of this.
Yeah, we worked with the church. In fact, the church plans, we approved the church plan. So that's why they're going to go ahead with this. And this is just a preliminary plan. When they did this drawing, it was, the church hadn't, confirmed that they were going to move that. So then in the final engineering plans and the cost estimates, that'll come out of there.
Okay. Because that should actually lower
Right.
our costs too, if they're not having another drive that we have to put in the drive for, right?
We won't be it'll just be a path cutting right across there. It'll be a little less expensive.
Yeah, good, good.
Hey, what's the width of this path? And is it consistent with the other sections?
This is more consistent with the path that's on the west side, which I believe is an 8-footer.
Okay.
And then it tapers down when you get, I don't know, you can kind of see it where that last driveway to the east.
Yeah.
That's where it tapers down to a narrower, that's a 6-foot down there.
Yeah, that's actually wider than the side, so then after that, because I just,
And it goes to a sidewalk.
and it goes to a sidewalk, so
Right.
I actually just walked it the other day.
Right.
So they did an asphalt driveway, or I'm sorry, yeah, they did an asphalt driveway, and then also the asphalt goes right into the walking path, so it's kind of a nice, there's no seam there.
transition, right.
It's a great transition, so that's gonna be 8 foot, then it goes down to 6 foot, then as you go a little further closer to, is that Prospect, or not, Western?
Western
As you
Avenue
get
there.
closer to Western, that goes to more of a sidewalk.
Where do you see it going to 6 foot? You mean
Well,
on the
see
east
how-
side of
yeah,
this?
see
Okay,
how-
yeah.
This is the new house.
And this is the existing sidewalk?
Well, they just when they built that house, they extended that.
Okay.
The existing sidewalk's even further east, it doesn't
You
show
don't
on
see
it.
it.
Okay.
Existing sidewalks further.
That's going to be.
I guess my point is, as long as what's being built is the standard 8 foot, because that's the
Yes.
typical,
If you go out there now, it's.
not 8 foot.
Really, it's not even, I think it's 4 feet.
Yeah.
But if you cross over to the west of Devon, it's
Yeah,
all,
then
it's,
it
that-
goes-
that's what it's gonna look
Yep,
like.
okay.
Right.
Jim, what's the state law now? I mean, are we, I've thought we were required to have 10-foot bicycle paths.
It basically, in this area, this is what fits in there. We don't have to have, the 10 foot's a recommended standard with shoulders and everything. When you're working in this narrow of an area with the slope and everything, this is about, the engineering designed it to what they could fit in there. Because really the primary in this project is really for the drainage. I mean, the path is gravy. The drainage is what's been the problem, because as you know, that it rains and it sits there. And it just, so we're putting all that in pipe, and then we're gonna create some bioswales and pick up a lot of it, it just sheet flow, it comes to a certain point and it doesn't sheet flow, but there's gutters coming off the road, and it's just draining into that ditch. So we're picking all that up and then running it out so that it'll flow better and won't have that constant standing water, be a mosquito problem and mushy for the church. And
It's good.
they saw all our plans, they're engineers and they're site people, so.
There's no issues with the Army Corps of Engineers with the drainage with the drainage pipes and stuff that, with that creek to the east of their property.
We have to work with the Corps to make sure that we're not doing anything that they wouldn't think is correct.
They've tried to go through all that as well as they can. They've gotten
part of our engineering team, Erin, the engineer who's working on it, she's a wetland specialist.
Okay.
She's also knows the native species and that, so when it comes, when it's final design, we'll have landscaping with native species, with the bioswales, and she's working through that with the Corps.
All right, good, good. Any other questions about this Cook County grant
I guess what's the status of the grant? We're submitting it now for the,
for next year?
What's that?
we're submitting the application for the grant?
We did already. We had to submit that, actually, kind of overlaps, but we submitted that in March. And then we had, subsequent to our March submittal, they did a phone interview, and with the, I think we did that in April, and that's for the follow-up project. They wanted to know the status of
The engineering.
this one, the engineering, and then how we were planning on following up with the construction. So that kind of gave us some confidence that they're still considering us.
Okay.
If we wouldn't have got that phone interview, we would have been out. They would have said,
Sure,
you're done. So,
Good, good.
yeah, so they want to see this, we believe they want to see it constructed.
Okay, good, thanks.
Any other comments or questions on the Invest and Cook grant?
The church is actually in Cook County.
All right, if not, then let's move on. The next thing we have, well, since we do have representatives from the Forest Preserve and the Park District here, let's maybe have you step up to the microphone, give us an update.
My name is Mark Becker. I'm a landscape architect for the Forest Preserve District of DuPage County. I have an update on the North Central DuPage Regional Trail section from Woodland Hills neighborhood to Prairie Path along Bunker Road. We completed the qualification space selection process, so we're ready to proceed with phase 2 once we wrap up phase 1 of the IDOT design process. Phase 1, we did run into a little bit of a snag on the biological clearance. In that IDOT identified the corridor, the project corridor, as high likelihood of habitat for the rusty patch bumblebee. So, as a conservation organization, it's good news that we have an endangered species on our property, but it is going to hold up the project. The procedure with IDOT is we have to have the Illinois Natural History Survey come and do a survey throughout the growing season to determine whether or not there are bumblebees within the project site. And if there are, then they need to then apply for an incidental take authorization, which then allows them to work on a conservation plan to relocate and assist the endangered bumblebees. So, if we can get through that process, we're still looking at trying to start construction in 2020. We're just working through the process with IDOT. Do you have any questions about that?
Is there a risk of losing the funding? I thought I heard at one point if it wasn't done by 2020, there was a funding.
As I believe as I understand it, the sunset of the funds, as long as the project is started within that window, should be fine. And I haven't heard that we are at risk of losing any of the funding.
Okay. And then I think the last update I heard, I thought construction was supposed to start in 2019, but the bumblebee issue now is extending that to 2020.
We had originally envisioned starting phase 2 already, but we can't proceed with phase 2 until we get sign off on phase 1, and we can file our clearance in order to complete that.
I'm just curious how they determined there was endangered bumblebees.
I was curious myself. There is actually a statewide map, our state website dedicated to this bumblebee, and it shows the areas that are high likelihood for habitat.
Okay.
There's a big red splotch right over Craftsman Woods.
Okay.
And this is not the only project that's been held up. There's been some highway projects have been held up because of the bumblebee. I think one of them was a bridge, northern Kane County. And that was, they had to do the same kind of biological survey.
Gotcha.
Amazing,
Yeah.
amazing. All right, thank you. Next up would be Park District.
Short update today is to happily report that the boardwalk at Beaver Pond was completed.
Oh, it was.
Thanks to all the wet weather we were having this spring. There is still a little bit of restoration that needs to be done, and as soon as it gets dry enough, they will be taking care of the restoration project of the land. That was the only update that I had, unless you guys have any questions.
Is it open for use? People can go.
Using it.
Ah, very good.
Good.
Another thing I haven't done lately. So, I walked around the pond that's half a mile from my house. So,
There now you have a little more incentive.
Yeah.
very,
Very much.
very good. Thank you. All right, next on the agenda is grants and updates. We've already talked in the Invest and Cook grant, the preliminary plan update, and the plan for the development, if it comes through. IDNR grants, do we have?
We just submitted a request at IDNR's urging to extend the project for an additional 2 years since the funding is still on hold. It's a grant that was awarded back in 2014 to connect Lakewood Mill to the state park as well as Kohler Fields. They're very small segments, but the funding has been on hold per the governor. So we're just they told us just to do a 2-year extension as opposed to the 1 year that we've been doing. So when it comes back out, we'll have to go back out to bid.
All right. Questions for Christie on any of
What's
that?
the cost of that project approximately in?
It was $70,000.
No, I always wondered who has the nerve to approach the state of Illinois and ask for money.
Well, it was a big funding source at the time, and so the grant was awarded, and then when Ronner came into office, it was as part of his way to get the budget negotiated, was he was freezing everything that wasn't critical funds. And so technically, the money, in theory, is somewhere. It's just on hold, and he's not releasing it. So,
I always feel like there should be volunteers, like Terry volunteers his life to make bicycles work, in Bartlett. I'm willing to go out there and volunteer to make a short path to connect over there at Kohler Field, just volunteer aspect of a resource to make some of this stuff happen. I don't know.
But you might kill bumblebees.
Yeah,
So, can't be doing that.
waiting on state funds to make it happen.
That's right.
Well, the state actually encouraged us to apply for this.
Yeah.
So that's where it came from. That's why we did it.
Yeah.
So, and then they didn't know it was going to get held up.
yeah, they were hopeful it was going to get released last year, towards the end of last year, and it just hasn't happened, so. We still turn in quarterly reports that say it's still on hold.
All right. Any other questions? If not, then the train station bike shelter, I know we've got the grant for that, and
It's another one that's going to be held up a little bit because of some additional paperwork. This was a joint application for 8 communities in the DuPage mayors and managers area. We were one of the towns, we got the shelter approved and the bike racks. Howard, who's from Howard Killian's Elmhurst engineer, he's the head lead on it, and he just informed us that because it involves federal money, that we have to do this, and I'm not familiar with it, but it's called a PPI report, and it has to do with clearing the federal money for us to get it. And once that's done, there'll be a kickoff meeting, and then we'll get the funding and then we can purchase the equipment, and then we're installing it like the other towns, or all the towns' public works departments are installing it. We know where we want to put it. It's going to be right in front of the station. hopefully it can get all done and still done this summer or into the fall, so. You know, it's just, you gotta do the paperwork, so. That was never a condition of the grant when we first applied. They didn't say anything about that. They thought we'd just get it. The last time we got it, we got those racks by the train station. They just said, yeah, you got it, and we'll buy the racks, and they delivered them, and here they are. This one's, I guess, a different funding source.
It's not bumblebees, it's the feds.
Yes, yes, everybody's gotta be
Slowing
counting.
things down.
You know, if I may, I ran across this old brochure. DuPage used to have a bike to Metra work week. It's an old brochure that was sponsored by Spin Doctor and Active Transportation Alliance. I don't know how old this is, but they're supposed to be giving away free coffee. The Taza coffee shop was given from a
That
certain
was a
time.
while ago, yeah, yeah.
It seemed like kind of a good idea. If you brought your bike, you get a free cup of coffee. And people would actually use the facilities once they're there. You know, is this on like our Bartlett Bike Month, May? Is that every May from now on? Is that going to be?
It's usually every May, so we do the bike proclamation. When we worked with that brochure, but we also subsequently we have Bike to Metra maps that we hand out, and they're handed out at the station. The current coffee shop owner probably would participate in it if we ever resurrected it again, but it's a different owner. Taz not there anymore, so. There is a coffee shop though, so we should ask them and say, hey, do you want to, if you give free coffee if somebody uses their bike, I want to wait though till we get the bike shelter and the racks in.
Right.
So once we do that, maybe we can work out a promotional work on that deal.
He might go for it if he's not selling much coffee now, a little bit of exposure. You know.
Yeah, I think it'll be good, it's good advertising, so we'll approach him with that. I think he's now on our EDC, the owner of that coffee shop.
Good. All right, well, thank you for those updates, grant updates. Any other questions by anyone on the committee? If not, well, then we'll move on to the discussion of adding on-street bike routes to the bike path map. And obviously, I'd like staff to comment on that. With regards to the on-street bike routes, I just want to be clear about what we're saying here. Are we actually saying signage, or are we saying stripes and actual markings on the street?
Right now, depending on what your recommendations are, it depends in the case. If there's parking on the street, typically you don't want to have the lines marked. You just want to have it as the route, because you don't want to cause confusion over whether people can park in bike lanes or not. We don't really have that many roads that are wide enough to allow on-street parking and have a separated bike lane. So for most cases, I think we'd probably just be looking at signage, which is cheaper for maintenance as well.
Right. Yeah, I looked at some of the roads that you have listed here, or this was coming from the Wayne Township, wasn't it?
Yes.
So some of the streets that they proposed, sorry about that, let me shut the ringer off here. Thought I had it off. On some of these streets that I've been on, just like you were saying, I don't know how we could have markings on the street and still have enough room.
Correct.
Some of the streets are big enough, you know, I think there was Mayflower and obviously Stearns Road and some of the other ones that I remember seeing here are wide enough to be able to have markings, but some of these would really have to consider, I think, because they are a little small to have.
Right. Village staff had very little input in the Wayne Township plan. So when we first got involved in it, they had already had public meetings and had already designated what they thought the route should be. So we were looking at saying, like, yes, we recommended the Wayne Township Bike Plan, the village board did previously, but we thought for our plan, we want to make sure the routes we put on our plan are what the village wants and what we think are the best connections. A lot of the residential roads in Bartlett are bicycle friendly. Most people are going to be comfortable enough riding down most of the streets. It's just, we want to look at routes that really help people get from one location to another. I mean, you don't want to put a sign on every street and say, every street in Bartlett's a bike route. We want to look at the ones that really help collect people and move them from one location to another.
And if we did do streets with actual markings, like what comes to mind is the city of Chicago, where they actually have a bike path, or
Right.
is this partly what we're talking about, right?
It's partly, some of it is just signage though, and you just have a sign that says this is the bike route, and it might tell you it takes you from this location, and it's 1.1 mile to, say, like the library or something. And so it's helping people wayfinding to get from one location to another.
Because on a two-way street, even if it was wide enough, you'd have to have the bike lines on either side.
Correct.
And that, I mean, it's nice to think about, but
Right.
you better have a pretty wide road for that.
Right, so we're thinking about what we have in Woodland Hills, where we have just the signage. This is the way that we want bikes. This is the preferred route that we'd like bikes to travel.
Yeah, I saw something like for Palace, and I thought, Palace is hardly wide enough for two cars.
Right.
You know, how are you going to put unless it's just signage?
Right.
Even then, I think you ride down Palace on a bike, you're still taking your life in your hands, so.
I think to your point, I mean, to me, a bike route it's a route that's going somewhere.
Right.
So, I was looking in here at the Wayne Township ones through like, is that Apple Orchard? I'm not sure that neighborhood there. It's like, it's going in different spaces, like, it's like, do you really need to call that a bike route? I know, after our last meeting, I rode my bike east through the DuPage, what's the north?
The North Central Trail?
North Central Trail, and I went through Mallard Lake, and then I continued out of Mallard Lake, and I went, across Gary, and I took it all the way to, I crossed Bloomingdale Road, I went all the way, but I know there's a spot in there where you go through like townhomes, and it was helpful to have the sign, it said bike route, and so I knew and it said with an arrow, so, and it was, maybe a mile through residential, and then it connected to the bridge over Lake Street, and then, so having those signs is helpful to get from one major path to another path. Otherwise, like you said, every street is a bicycle-friendly, pretty much.
Right.
In Bartlett, so I don't see any need to put any signs of bike routes or bike paths through any other neighborhood other than connecting the major routes.
Okay.
So what's the next step in getting these future on-street paths to be current paths? Is it just the signage?
It's getting us to have the board adopt, so we would like this committee to make recommendations. These are the streets that we would like to have designated as bike routes, having an amendment to the bike path map so that it's an official document. And then once we have that, then we can start with the signage.
So are you looking for us to go to ride these routes or run these routes? And
It is, well,
What
in addition to
do you need
Wayne,
from us?
since Wayne Township's plan only covers Wayne Township, that's only looking at the DuPage portion of the village.
okay, I see.
So, like, right now, Spalding Road is, we currently say that it'd be a future proposed bike path. Do we want that to be a bike path, or is that something we think could just be a route, and just a signed route? And even along Spalding going east from, on the other side of Naperville Road. It's possible we could have that as a future one, and then once the connection comes in on Naperville Road from the railroad tracks, some things you don't want to make the connection, you don't want to put in a route now that's not getting you anywhere. But on the west side, if you put in a route from Naperville to Lambert, that would help everybody there kind of be aware that people could be going to Riley's Run Park and things like that. So you want to look at what the destinations are. You don't want to put people on a route that's going to be like, oh, well, now you have to cross the railroad tracks, and we put you in a dangerous situation. We want to make sure what we're doing and what we install first actually makes sense.
So there's a route that's actually marked on the road, that's a bike route?
No, right now, our map calls for a proposed bike path, an off-street path.
Right.
Okay.
But it's something that it's hard to get funding, and the cost to get something installed after a subdivision has already been developed. Usually, we try to have the developers do it at the time of construction. So designating that a route would make drivers aware that their bicycles are allowed on the road, even though they're allowed everywhere. It'd make you a little more aware that it's okay for bicycles to be there. Bicycles could be there. So it's just kind of making people more aware when they're driving that bicycles can be on the road, and it's a way to get more connections in our network at a lower cost.
Right. You know, my input would be, if I can contribute here, is that the signs, just bike route, is that a driver's bike route, I better watch out for a bike, but a well-designed sign that shows a bicyclist, or perhaps someone on a cell phone, you know, with a big X through it. You know, it's a real threat now, people on the road texting, they can drift left and right, it's, anybody that rides this. And the people that actually give you birth, the 3 feet, that if you can do that, you give it to some type of universal way of acknowledging that, you know, from rider to rider, like thumbs up or thank you, or another signal you can give if they brush your handlebars. I know what, one comes to mind, you know, but that kind of stuff, it's dangerous on the road. Because people are in a hurry. They're going point A to point B. And whatever you could do with the signage to give people a heads up, a noticeable sign. I think a bike route doesn't make people think I better watch out for bicyclists. Or if it's something that's simple and cheap to make it, wow, you know, there's people out here on bikes.
The Woodland Hills is what that's kind of the sign that we're looking at putting up. And we made those in-house. And then I think the other one where it says stay 3 feet, I think they made those too. You know, we have that capability. So cost-wise, that's the most effective.
3 feet when able. If there's on a 2-lane road.
Right.
And you gotta wait, you know,
Right.
for opening. So I don't know that
We
people.
have it on Munger. I think we have those signs coming up there, so.
So as far as the, you've obviously made some recommendations to the committee here outlined in red on this table 2A with the streets that I think that are you implying that these are streets that you would recommend that we did on-street bicycle routes for?
I would personally, from a planning perspective, I think it'd be great to have the one along Apple Valley and then that comes along Foster. So that kind of gets you from the Home Depot to the Jewel. Like that kind of is a route that makes sense. And then I would also say the one along, what is this? Let's see more.
Now, have you gone off chart here? You said Apple Valley.
No, that's
You're talking about on the actual map here as opposed.
No, not all of them.
Yeah, those are just marked,
Those are,
just that are our roads as part of the Wayne.
yeah, the Wayne Town is dashed in blue. I don't think we necessarily need to say people need to, I don't think we need to do all of the ones that are on that chart. I think that's more than what's needed.
Okay. Yeah, because, I mean, I look at some of these and I think, well, yeah, Jervy Lane will get you to Western, and Western will get you back out to
Right.
Devon, but or do we really need signage on Jervy Lane, you know?
Right. I don't feel that that's necessarily a collector that's getting anyone from one place to another any more efficiently than what we already have.
Same thing with Cuyahoga will get you over to Apple Valley Drive, if you cut through the back way, back through there, but what are we, I don't know, I mean,
I think there's one spot on the map that I think that I've used is Naperville Road, south of Bartlett Road. I think there's a path, when they redid that intersection, I think there's a path that goes from that corner south to maybe the
About
DuPage.
200 yards, yeah.
Yeah, and then it stops.
And then it stops.
Right.
So if we could continue that path to where, I don't know what that street is that goes through the industrial park, but that industrial park, either there is a path that goes through there, and also the street's pretty wide and there's not much traffic through there. But like, when I leave my house here in downtown Bartlett, I run down Bartlett Road, and then we turn there and we have to get onto the street. So if we could put a path, continue that path to get to the business park, that'd be great. If not, maybe having a bike route a small bike route there that, you know, so cars, it's 4 lanes there, and it's 2 lanes on each side. And most of the cars are pretty good, they'll move over. Not everybody does, but, you know,
That's one that I would rather see as a path, just
Yeah.
because of the speed.
for sure. Yeah,
I think that's something like I would like to keep it still marked as a path on the future bike path map, because ideally we would want one. A route might be something we could do temporarily
sure.
in the meantime.
But maybe we should update that map to kind of, because it goes about 200 yards.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, I mean, because then if maybe the board sees it and says, well, okay, well, there's not much of a distance there to connect that.
There's a nice gravel path in there, but it's marked as no trespassing, which is
Yeah.
Yes.
a nice little loop to go through. But
Yeah.
So when can we start putting up signs, I guess?
What?
When can we start putting up signs?
After we get like a solid recommendation from this committee, and then
Okay.
we would have to take the map before the village board.
Okay?
And then after
With the
that,
actual designated
designated
routes.
routes, with the designated routes. And then we can say these are officially the routes that we're designating as bike routes, and then we could put the signage up.
Okay.
It's not a long-term, it's not like a 10-year project. I mean, it's pretty
You're not
straightforward.
looking for that today.
No, we're looking at you guys to look over the map, think about what routes you think are appropriate, which ones you don't, and especially looking at Cook County.
Okay,
Because Cook County, we've never looked at before. Wayne Township at least kind of gave us a start, but I think sometimes people lost perspective of the routes to get from one place to another. And I want to make sure there's a destination or something. And there might be some routes, like I said, I think doing Spalding on the east side might be okay as long as we're not directing them south to Naperville Road, because we don't want to send people to the metro tracks where there's not a crossing.
Yeah, so in Cook County is another example, Devon, you know, when Devon, so the corner of Devon and Bartlett Road where we're gonna do that work, there's a bike path that crosses Pondview and Giles Court,
Kind of stops.
and then it stops.
Right.
So now, you know, like, and I gotta tell you, I think that's 25 miles an hour and the cars come buzzing through there. So we run, but we run up on the sidewalk just because, especially we run a lot of times in the morning when it's dark. It's, you know, but that would be a good spot to have a bike path, a bike route.
Okay.
It'd be better to have a bike path, continue it through there along the pond to at least a sidewalk. But otherwise,
Walk over there,
having a
and
bike,
I put out that I wanted a path, and
yeah. I mean, a
was
path would
denied.
be best, right? Because there's one there, it just stops.
Right.
It just stops.
It just
right.
stops.
Lakes there, the pond, you know, so, but I think having a bike route on there, that kind of, because then beyond that, it gets to Devon and, you know, it goes across and then you get on the path and you can go all the way.
Yeah, the path picks up on the north side of the lake, you know, and then it goes.
Well, it's
past-
not, it's a sidewalk.
Side, no, on the east side. There's a path on the east side, north, just when the lake.
Yeah, yeah.
That
Yeah.
subdivision.
Yeah, by Giles there, yeah.
So that's a good logical connection there.
But yeah, because then also as you go east, you know, it comes around and you cross Bartlett Road and it gets on the main path and you can
Right.
get all the way into Mallard Lake and beyond. So that to me is ultimately what we're talking about.
Yes.
okay, so the action's on us. So what's our next? I mean, I can take a first stab at, you know, putting a list together, or maybe we all put a list together and then
Do we-
via email, send it to the group.
Do we talk about this at the next meeting or do we want recommendations?
The next meeting would be a good one
Yeah.
to get.
If everyone comes with
recommendation.
a list to the next meeting,
Okay.
and then we can go through and kind of discuss all of them. And then I think if there's a discussion at one of our meetings, it gives more credence to what was discussed when it goes to the village board, because they'll get a copy of the minutes, so they can see why we think we should have a route at this location.
And so, sorry, so we also should make an assumption based on prior conversations that we're not gonna, so as an example, that path on Naperville Road, we're not gonna build any new paths for now because we're gonna improve the poor paths that we have,
But we will still show them on our plan.
Okay.
They're future.
right? But for now, even though those might be best first choices, we're not gonna do that for now. And so we're just looking solely as where are we gonna put on-street bike route signs to connect.
Not on-street markings, just.
Just
Signs.
signed routes.
Right.
Just-
Kind of like the neighborhood in whatever town that was, Bloomingdale, that I rode through.
Bloomingdale and Roselle both have.
And ultimately,
street.
it's basically like these. And so, and these are great because it does say like, this way 1.1 miles, you know, sometimes.
Joe brings up a point, though, that I don't know that it's that relevant, but I feel like it's almost biased, because Joe's a runner, and this whole bike and run committee is not just a bicycle committee. So these signs say bicycle route, but should they say bicycle run route? I mean, for the people, I think some people can be intimidated thinking, well, I better not get on that, it's just for bicycles. And that's not the case, you know? So I don't know if the sign should say more than just biking or not.
I mean, I will tell you personally, I mean, I don't think a route's a route if we could be in a safe area or a safe path of running, whether it's a run or a bike. I don't think it matters. I think it would just,
We can look and see if there's any kind of prototype, and if we can do it, because you could, like on that one, you could say it's bike and run and walking connection, because where you run, I walk on that,
yeah,
on the side, on the grass. you
Yeah.
know? I mean, I'm not on the street. I'm not walking on the
yeah.
street.
And that's not a funny, the geese like to hang out over there too.
Right.
It's not
So
so.
I gotta walk, I gotta step around the geese.
In my experience, the bikers and the runners have kind of a brotherhood going. The bikers will give a bell or on your left, and bikers like Joe will, a cool signal like, I got you, acknowledge that you're coming up on them rather than just surprising them with a
Right, right.
bike whipping around them. So it's kind of a cool thing. I kind of like that when guys do that. When they do that, Terry's got a little bell he uses. That's perfect.
Should this, and I have no problems with this, and I guess I can ask the committee, I certainly have no issues with people in the community. Now Terry sitting in the audience as opposed to being on the committee, but certainly having your input, Terry, and other people that biking, that I know that Tom, it's Tom's last name, that had come to several of our meetings, is a fairly avid biker.
Tom Steele.
Steele. People like Terry and Tom and other people in the committee, if they have suggestions about on-sign, I certainly think if they want to send them into the village, I think there's no reason why we wouldn't entertain their suggestions. So, then we can help pare it down from there as to what we really want to go with.
I sort of feel like what are the common destinations out of Bartlett? That's where you need a bike path. You don't need random bike paths all through
Right.
Bartlett. I'm going to the Prairie Path. What's the established, what's the village's recommended path, and respect that path? We're going that's where I go all the time, is to the Illinois Prairie Path, and how do I get there? An endorsed path for getting there. And also coming back to Bartlett from the Prairie Path. I don't know if you could get to Bartlett here, a sign this way to Bartlett, go there and go to TL's and get something to eat.
Well, we got the bumblebees holding that up a little bit. But that was the idea with the path that Mark detailed. But that's kind of the idea.
All right, so I think that the understanding is that we're going to come back with suggestions for our next meeting for staff, which will be incorporated into our bike plan.
Feel free to send me your recommendations ahead of time so we can kind of map things out and we can work on that interactively during the next meeting.
And while we're speaking of signs, over the past couple of meetings, I've kind of asked for a couple, I've proposed some signage, and it seemed to be well received, but I haven't seen them yet. And that's the actual North Central DuPage Regional label on a couple of the signs, designating the route. And then also some crossings. All of the street crossings along Stearns and Schick, where the stop line is here, and then there's a path before the street, some type of sign saying that there's a bike crossing between that stop sign. Is there any update or any progress on that, or is that part of the bike maintenance plan, or the bike path maintenance?
Let me follow up with Dan at Public
Right.
Works.
Okay.
And see, because they're
Dan,
the
you
ones with the
remember-
Stein. I remember the conversation about that. I know he was going to talk to see if it was something we could produce in-house
Something
or.
like this?
Right.
Right,
Yeah, okay.
yeah.
Yeah, and I will say again, not ever going down that path, that North Central DuPage path, I didn't know where it went. but I know you had said you went, so I had an afternoon, so I just went and I just kept going and going. I went, I think, 11 miles and then turned around and came back. But it was helpful to have those signs because I knew I was going the right way. A couple times I got them, like, which way to go? And I saw the bike route, and it really is helpful.
Yeah, the signage basically from Mallard Lake east is fantastic.
It's really good. It's really good, and it's helpful. I mean, I don't think I would have found my way.
Yeah,
Especially if we're going to make Struckman a bike route.
right.
We need a sign saying, hey, that North Central is turning off here.
Correct.
Because
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
All right, any other comments or suggestions with regards to the on-street bike routes? We didn't allow any comments from the audience. If you'd like to make a, same as in the village, Terry, a 3-minute comment, go right ahead.
Bucket ice water.
No, you got 3 minutes.
I'm Terry Witt, 471 Southwestern Avenue. I was on the Wayne Township Bike Plan Committee, living on Western Avenue. And Bruce, you can attest that we have a lot of bicycle riders running down there. It's a perfect route, and I know Joe runs down that street a lot. I would recommend that we get signs similar to Schaumburg. They're called 3D signs. Destination, direction, distance. Just put one sign right at the corner of Devon and Western, with a bicycle on it, points this way, and it says library, 1.5 miles. Community center, 1.5 miles. And that'll get people going. That's all you need. You got a little bicycle sign, people will recognize, oh, hey, this is gonna be a friendly street. We got kids all the time. So, anyway, Kim, our 2 4th grade daughters give thumbs up on the Beaver Pond boardwalk. It's gorgeous. It was the highlight of the bike ride. Now, the next weekend, when it rained, almost the whole entire trail was flooded. It was not walkable at all. And there was water at both ends of the boardwalk, so you couldn't use the boardwalk, but you couldn't get there anyway, so it wasn't a big deal. That was on Saturday. On Monday, when I went back, the trail was dry, and the boardwalk was perfectly passable. However, if that old boardwalk had been there, it would have been surrounded by water. So I consider it a success. The other thing is, I would consider that the flood control project that went through Beaver Pond has to be a success. There was no water circling those homes. I mean, those homes were underwater.
No, yeah, there's,
And it's really been a good project. So the Beaver Pond is really nice, so.
a lot of that water's going west now, behind Home Depot. That's where it's headed to, so, yeah.
So I would say that's all successful. Forest Reserve, yeah, we've been talking about the North Central Trail. Those trail markings that you started putting up at all the Forest Reserve are really nice. They're gorgeous, they look beautiful. And when you got signage, you can follow. That North Central Trail goes all the way to Bussey Woods. And in fact, I'm leading a ride with the Friends of Cycling of Elk Grove from Bussey Woods to Bartlett along the trail on July 14th, so if anybody wants to come with me, let me know. I'm gonna drive there, drive back, it'll be about 35 miles round trip. So, but getting other people to understand how the trail comes, because when we get people coming to Bartlett on the trails, they're spending money. We could double our population on any given day. They could buy extra hamburgers, tacos, Cokes, all that kind of stuff. Okay, last Tuesday was Bike to Work Day with Chairman Dan Cronin, and because it was raining off and on, and we had several stops under some shelters along the way, it gave me a great opportunity to say, hey, we need a bike side path down Stearns Road from 59 to the State Park. So I bent his ear a couple of times and a bunch of the staff about that, because it's been on the plans for a long time. And many people would love to ride to the state park, and it really be good for us economically, because there's like 40,000 people a year ride right past the state park on the Prairie Path. And if we had a path come on into Bartlett, they can stop at Dog Pond or stop at any of those places, get some refreshments. Otherwise, they gotta ride all the way to Wheaton or all the way to Elgin. They could just come on right on over here. We got a nice side path. So anyway, with Cook County, I asked them about Spitzer Road. I said, what's going on with Spitzer Road? Because it's almost done. And they said, well, they will dedicate Spitzer Road, that's down there by Firehouse 3. They will dedicate Spitzer Road as soon as the village and the township will agree on some kind of jurisdictional agreement. Once that's done, they will dedicate it. Now, why is that important? Well, if you take that West Bartlett side path all the way to Firehouse number 3, turn left on Spitzer, you can go all the way through to Army, or to Starnes, and then on to the state park. That's the easiest way to get there. And that would be a good bike route design. Taking us all the way out there.
Cook County is, Spitzer's our road.
Well,
I don't know if he's talking about West Bartlett in that area, because we built that road, and that's
well, then, but
gonna
it's
be
not,
part of
it says
our road
closed except for local traffic, and I took it to mean, well, I'm a bicycle rider.
It's more closed because they have just issued the permit for the tie-in to West Bartlett, which is their road jurisdiction. That's really the only reason it's closed.
Okay.
So they have the jurisdiction basically from the right-of-way of West Bartlett, in just kind of like that apron. That's why it's closed. And then the rest of it's part of our road system.
It's our
It would
road.
be a great bike route. It's very wide.
Well, it will be for a while because it's going to be full of trucks pretty
That's
soon.
okay.
Yeah, you're right.
Smooth, yeah.
They're hitting me on
Right,
South
right.
Bartlett, they're hitting me on Stearns,
Yeah.
they're hitting me all the way out to the state park. They're not gonna be going as fast on Spitzer.
Yeah,
as
there
are
won't be.
Stearns. They go in convoys. But at any rate, Spitzer should be a bike route, it should be finished, it should get that
Yeah,
going.
it's close to being finished.
That would be good. Okay. My last comment, on the minutes, Bruce, you had asked about a bike map in the bike store at Spin Doctors. Well, right as you walk in the door, for years, there's a great big active transportation alliance map right on the board, and there's village maps there for anybody who wants them, of course. Anybody who wants to know where they like to bicycle, we're willing to help them out, so.
Actually, I just gave Greg that map that you handed out, Chris, the
Great.
real simple one. He loved it because you can actually make sense out of that one. The big one is so intimidating. It's got every road that exists in Chicagoland.
Well, that's so you can know where the North Central Trail goes,
Yeah.
all the other trails.
But he seemed to be interested in that he's going to post that one that we had for general reference and have people make comments on it about what they experienced and stuff.
And you were talking about Devon Avenue and the swap. As I'm riding down the bike path, coming towards Devon Avenue, the cars are going 40 miles an hour. And I want to turn onto the street. The street's 25, and they're flying down, and they can't really see the intersection very well because there's all kinds of invasive species growing below the tree. If you've ever been over it, you cannot see. If you stop behind the stop sign where you're supposed to, you cannot see the traffic coming down Devon Avenue, or coming down West Bartlett Road. And if you're on West Bartlett Road, you can't see if anybody's coming out Devon. And when I'm riding down that path, I'm looking all over the place because people are trying to turn and do all kinds of crazy things, and you can't see. Very poor visibility there. We should just clean out all that invasive species, so at least 10 feet up.
You think that's private property?
Well,
I think, we don't
well, I think
own
we've
it.
got to have some kind of ordinance that there's got to be
Yeah.
a line of sight
Yeah,
at
I'll
every intersection.
send the weed inspector out there, because that could be, it could be that property that's right there. They just aren't cutting it. They should be.
Cut it for the 20 years we've lived there. so.
Yeah, well, they have that forest area that they kind of ignore
The
cutting
trees are,
it.
the trees are fine.
Yeah, it's the
It's
underbrush.
species that are,
Chairman?
that'll make that path a lot nicer.
All right, thank you for comments, Terry.
2 minutes and 30 seconds?
We let you go a little long, but that's okay. We'll do it this time. All right. Any other comments?
Michael, I've got a couple items I want to talk about, and one is kind of going back to the grants. I've done some research, and we're doing a great job with the current grants, but there's a ton of money out there if we just apply for it. Just doing a simple Google search on bicycle path grants, I had 2 pages of 6 solid leads. One of them, the U.S. Department of Transportation just launched something called the Build Transportation Program. They claim to have $1.5 billion available for local projects, but you need to apply by July 19th. I can give you the website if you want. The Federal Highway Administration has got a surface transportation grant. There's something called CMAQ. It's Congestion Mitigation Air Quality. Elgin just got $2.5 million to build the path from Bowes Creek to the Fox River. And it's going to be partially funded by $600,000 by Elgin. That's going to basically go from Bowes Creek and it's going to stop at the river until another project comes along where they can get across the river with the path. There's a organization called People for Bikes. They have an annual grant. There's an organization called Bikes Belong. They have an annual grant. Rails to Trails, which we all probably heard of, they have a grant. I don't know if we can qualify for that, but again, these are all out there. And there's an organization called npconnect.org. It stands for Nonprofit Connect. They have a searchable database of grants. So I think I would love to see us apply for more grants. I mean, because everything we talk about always comes down to money, right? And there's money out there. We just have to ask for it.
How much is the funding on those grants? Partial?
Yeah, I don't know the specifics of it. And I don't know if you have to have a dedicated project first, or if it's just, hey, I need, like if you look at Tyler's spreadsheet, he's got $141,000 of maintenance. Do we just submit a grant for that and get that covered? We have a ton of suggestions on this map we went through last time for paths and things like that. Would love it. Would love to do that. So some of these smaller ones, like the People for Bikes and Bikes Belong, those might be smaller, like $20,000, $30,000. But what intrigued me the most was that U.S. Department of Transportation one, where they claim to have $1.5 billion available for, and they say for local and regional projects. So the Forest Preserve, you guys might be able to apply for something. I don't know, the Park District, if there's something you haven't, thought about. I don't know, I think it's just a huge opportunity that we can take a look at.
Some of that build money is going for improving, like, I-294, some of the big major projects. We looked at that for a possible overpass over the railroad tracks going out West Bartlett Road.
Yep.
And when we did some of the initial analysis of it and then contacted some of the people who are involved in that, we just didn't quite cut the mustard in terms of the importance of because it's geared for improving truck routes and improving congestion too.
Yeah.
We get CMAQ is how we fund all those 59 and the intersection 59 and West Bartlett. A lot of those are CMAQ. And
Okay.
West Bartlett Road's going to be a CMAQ funded intersection improvement. So the good thing about those is that they do include some of the bike connections. Sometimes they don't have a good logical termini because they run them to, you're running a bike path to a bridge.
Yeah.
Can't put the path over the bridge. But those are all good suggestions. We have people that work on grants.
Okay.
We try to get like the ones that we feel we qualify, but usually they all have a local share. And to get to that local share, you have to make sure that the board and your committee, you have to recommend, here's what we think we should do. So it's always a match. You gotta have the project like the West Bartlett Road one that we did that's in here. There wasn't a tremendous amount of local share, but there was one.
Yeah.
the bike shelters, I mean, we're 35,000, we have to come up with X amount, so, but there's always that local share, and then the board has to approve it.
Okay.
So that's where
And I understand that, and as long as someone's looking at it,
Right.
I guess that's my point is, I just did a 5-minute search, and my eyes lit up,
Right.
Yeah.
you couldn't believe it, but, yeah, let's, if we need to, if I come across one, I'll send it to you. If I come across one that
do
might be
that.
promising. And then my second comment, I guess in regards to that, the decision for the path at 59 and West Bartlett, I read about it in the paper. And while I understand the arguments on both sides, I think what I would have liked to have seen is maybe some initial upfront participation from this committee into the decision to not accept the money for that. Because coming back full circle back to these grants, maybe there was a grant somewhere that we could have applied for the bridge to go over the railroad tracks there. And then still taken the free path from the IDOT and then extended it by a grant or something. So I guess maybe to better the process, if a decision like this comes up, maybe let us know. And I wasn't correct. I didn't know that it was even on the board meeting agenda. But I would have liked to have at least have been there.
Right.
To provide some input or, to whatever. But I think I want to work both ways. We're all here to better Bartlett, right? So I respect that, and I respect the reasoning and the decision. I think we should work better and maybe, consult us first before that was made. And, maybe the outcome would be the same, like in all likelihood. But I was kind of surprised when I read it in the paper, so.
And I did bring that up at the board meeting, John. And we took the advice from Public Works about it basically being somewhat of a safety issue.
Sure.
And then you have to find a way to put the path alongside the bridge until they widen the bridge. It would be the only other option. And I'm not saying it's impossible to do, but it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And if we're going to do that, I'd rather put a bridge over the railroad tracks out west of town than beside a bridge. So, yeah, I get it.
And I understand that, and I'm saying as a committee, I would have liked to maybe had a discussion about that.
Feel free to always call me. I mean,
Again, but I didn't know about it until after the fact.
Okay.
So that's my only comment. That's just to better the process going forward.
right.
Maybe transparency, whatever you want to call it. But
Okay.
thank you.
Any other comments? Then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And second. And call the roll.
Dan Palmer,
Yes.
Bruce Hendricks.
Yes.
Joe Stacy.
Yes.
John Getz.
Yes?
Mike Kammerer.
Yes. Meeting is adjourned. We will plan on seeing